Richard Eugene Hickok and Perry Edward Smith were in prison when they heard from another inmate that Herb Clutter was a very wealthy man with a safe inside his home. Floyd Wells, the prisoner who informed Smith and Hickok about the safe, had been a previous employer of Herbert Clutter. Hickok and Smith would immediately take this information and conduct a plan to get their hands on the Clutter's money once they were released. Hickok and Smith would act out their plan on the night of November 14th, 1959. The men traveled over 400 miles in order to arrive at the Clutter family home. In the early hours of November 15th, 1959, Hickok and Smith would approach the Clutter home to search for any form of entry. To their luck, the men would find an unlocked door and proceeded to enter the home. They were all asleep as Hickok and Smith quietly searched their home. When the men didn't discover the safe, they would awake Herbert Clutter, but to their dismay, Herbert only offered them the small amount of cash he had on him and insisted to the men that there was no more money. Not satisfied with Herbert's answer, the men would wake up the remainder members of the family and continued the search of the home once again. After Hickok and Smith ransacked the Clutter's home, the men got no more than $50, a pair of binoculars, and a portable radio. No witnesses was Hickok's and Smith's mantra during their long drive to the Clutter's home. After the men found everything they deemed valuable inside the home, they executed all 4 of the Clutter family members in cold blood. It wouldn't be until a family friend of the Clutter family would drop off their daughter to attend church with the family, only to discover the bodies of the Clutter family members laid across the home. The family friend would immediately call the police. Officers would arrive to a gruesome scene. They would discover Herbert Clutter, 48, laid on a mattress in the basement, with his hands bound and his mouth taped shut. Herbert had been stabbed, a shotgun shot to his head and his throat slashed. Kenya Neal Clutter was found bound, gagged, and shot in the head on the couch in the adjoining room. Bonnie Mae Clutter was found in an upstairs bedroom, bound, gagged, and shot in the head. In a separate room, also upstairs bedroom, Nancy Mae Clutter was found bound and shot in the head. Investigators would use photographs taken at the crime scene to find a key piece of evidence, a bloody footprint that wasn't visible to the naked eye. Another photograph would show a tire track left in haste by the murderers. Investigators were also able to get information from Floyd Wells, who ratted out Hickok and Smith for the ransom money being offered at the time. Hickok and Smith would immediately go on the run after the murders. The men would travel to Kansas City, where Hickok would write several bad checks. The men would then stay in Mexico for a short period of time, before pawning the binoculars and hitchhiking through California en route to Nebraska. After a short time in Nebraska, the men traveled to Iowa, where they stole a car before returning to Kansas City. They would eventually travel to Florida and Nevada. It would ultimately be Nevada where Hickok and Smith would get caught, still in the stolen car they acquired in Iowa. Hickok and Smith were arrested. Both Hickok and Smith would confess to the murders, and they would stand trial on March 22nd, 1960 for the murders of Herbert, Bonnie, Nancy, and Kenyon Clutter. A jury full of men would come back with a guilty verdict, and they recommended the death penalty for both men. Arthur Clutter, Herbert Clutter's younger brother, who represented the Clutter family in the courtroom, stated,
"Just want to get a good look at Smith and Hickok. I just want to see what kind of animals they are. The way I feel, I could tear them apart."
Richard Eugene Hickok and Perry Edward Smith remained on death row for 5 years. On April 14th, 1965, both men would have their final meals in separate rooms, with a chaplain sitting by. Both men had the same meal: spiced shrimp, French fries, garlic bread, ice cream, and strawberries with whipped cream. Perry Smith's last words were,
"I think it is a hell of a thing that a life has to be taken in this manner. I say this especially because there's a great deal I could have offered society. I certainly think capital punishment is legally and morally wrong. Any apology for what I have done is meaningless at this time. I don't have any animosities toward anyone involved in this matter. I think that is all."
When Richard Hickok was asked if he had any final words, his reply was,
"No, I guess I don't. You're sending me to a better place than this."
Hickok stated that he didn't hold a grudge against the church for his role in the case, and said,
"Goodbye."
Perry Smith and Richard Hickok would be executed on April 14th, 1965 by hanging in the gallows of the prison with very few people as witnesses.